The emergency transmission reached Earth 17 hours later. By the time Hyunwoo and his team arrived at Relay Station Kepler-7, the nearest human outpost, the entire galaxy was in chaos. Every news channel showed the same story. Every government was convening emergency sessions. Every scientist was reviewing the architect data with growing horror. Admiral Bo-Ra Song met them at the docking bay. She was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen 3 wars, and she looked more tired than Hyunwoo had ever seen another human being. "Dr. Kim," she said, her voice formal despite the circumstances, "the Unified Earth Council has classified your discovery at the highest level. We've established a crisis response center on Luna. You and your team are required to attend immediately." Hyunwoo nodded. He had expected this. What he hadn't expected was the look of raw fear in the Admiral's eyes, a woman who had stared down enemy fleets without flinching. If she was scared, things were worse than he thought. The journey to Luna took 6 hours via fast courier ship. During that time, Gina monitored galactic communications and reported that panic was spreading faster than the crisis response. 3 colonies had attempted to evacuate beyond the galactic rim. 2 species had declared war on their neighbors, apparently deciding that if they were going to die anyway, they might as well settle old grudges. Markets were crashing. Religions were fracturing between those who saw this as divine judgment and those who saw it as proof that the universe was meaningless. "Any good news?" Hyunwoo asked, knowing the answer but hoping anyway. Jinna managed a weak smile. The Vril Collective sent a message. They're putting aside their conflict with humanity to work on this together. Several other species have done the same. If nothing else, we might die united. The crisis center on Luna was built into the moon's interior, protected by layers of rock and defensive shields. Hyunwoo and his team were escorted through security checkpoints and into a massive command chamber, where hundreds of the galaxy's greatest minds had assembled. Humans worked alongside aliens of every description, all focused on the same goal: finding a way to stop the cascade. Dr. Sung Ho Kang approached them immediately. He was Earth's leading theoretical physicist, a thin man in his 60s who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Dr. Kim, thank God you're here. We've been verifying the architect mathematics for 72 hours straight. I have good news and bad news." "Start with the bad news," Hyunwoo said. "The architects were right about everything. Their mathematics is flawless. We've checked it against every model we have, and it all holds up. The cascade is real, it's already started, and it's going to kill everything in this galaxy." Sung Ho paused, adjusting his glasses with shaking hands. "The good news is that their timeline calculations were slightly pessimistic. We have 18 months before Earth is affected, as you calculated, but some frontier colonies are already experiencing early-stage cascade effects. We've had to evacuate 3 outposts in the past 12 hours. Dae-hyun looked at the main display, which showed the galaxy with red zones marked and constantly updating as new data came in. The red zones were larger than they had been in the simulation, growing faster than the models predicted. "Why is it spreading faster than expected?" he asked. A new voice answered, speaking through a translation device. The speaker was a Vril, insect-like and massive, with crystalline wings and compound eyes. "Because we did not stop using FTL travel immediately. Every species that received the warning had ships already in transit, jumps already planned. Some decided to make one last trip home. Others panicked and tried to run. In the first 17 hours after the warning, we collectively made approximately 500,000 new FTL jumps." The room fell silent at that. 500,000 more tears in space-time, all created by people who knew they were making the problem worse but couldn't help themselves. Hyunwoo felt a weight settle on his chest. Humanity had always been good at knowing what they should do and doing the opposite anyway. Dr. Hae-won Shin, a quantum mechanics expert, stood up from her workstation. She was young, barely 30, and she had been studying the datasphere contents nonstop since receiving them. "We need to focus on solutions, not problems we can't change. I've been reviewing the other warnings in the database, looking for species that came close to stopping the cascade. 3 civilizations got further than the others." She brought up data on the main screen, showing 3 different species and their attempted solutions. The first had tried to close the tiers using focused gravitational waves. It had worked on a small scale but required more energy than a star produced. They ran out of resources before completing the project. The second had attempted to develop an FTL drive that didn't create tiers. They succeeded, but too late. Their new technology took 15 years to invent, and by then the cascade had consumed their civilization. The third, a species called the Weavers, had theorized something different. They proposed using the same quantum tunneling technology that created the problem to fix it. Massive, coordinated FTL pulses at specific coordinates could generate a resonance wave that would force spacetime to heal itself. The mathematics looked sound, but the Weavers had died before they could test it. Their civilization had collapsed from social breakdown rather than the cascade itself, torn apart by panic and despair. "This is our best shot," Haywan said, highlighting the Weaver theory. "I've been working with teams across the galaxy to refine their mathematics. We think it could work, but it requires perfect coordination, massive resources, and technology we don't currently have." "What do we need?" Admiral Bora asked from the back of the room. Sung Ho pulled up a requirements list that made everyone's hearts sink. 10,000 FTL pulse generators, each one the size of a skyscraper. They need to be positioned at exact coordinates across the galaxy, accurate to within 1 millimeter across distances of thousands of light years, and they all need to fire simultaneously, within a microsecond of each other. The power requirements alone are staggering. "How staggering?" the Admiral pressed. "Approximately equal to the total energy output of our sun over 1 million years, for each generator." Daehyun laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "That's impossible. We don't have the resources, the technology, or the time to build something like that." "Then we make it possible," Hyunwoo said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. The architects failed because they worked alone. The Weavers failed because they gave up. We have something they didn't have. 147 species, all with different technologies and different resources. We have the combined industrial capacity of an entire galaxy, and we have a reason to try. Young Mi was already working on her tablet, pulling up industrial data from across human space. "If we mobilize every construction facility, every automated factory, every resource we have, we could build maybe 300 generators in 18 months. That's nowhere near enough, so we need help," Jinna said. She was looking at communication logs, scrolling through diplomatic channels. "We need every species in the galaxy to contribute, and we need them to do it now, not after months of debate and negotiation." The Vril representative clicked its mandibles in what the translation software rendered as thoughtful consideration. "My people will help. We have extensive construction capabilities, but others will need convincing. There are species who believe this is a lie designed to manipulate them, others who think the effort is pointless, and some who simply hate other species too much to work with them." Admiral Bora stepped forward, her military bearing evident even in this room of scientists. "That's where I come in. Dr. Kim, I'm promoting your mission to the highest priority. You'll have access to every resource the unified Earth government can provide. But more than that, I'm assigning Jinna Park to lead our diplomatic effort. We need someone who can convince the galaxy to unite, and based on her record, she's our best chance." Jinna looked startled. "Admiral, I'm a communications specialist, not a diplomat. You're someone who talks to alien species every day and makes them like you. That's more valuable than any training right now." The Admiral turned to address the entire room. "We're calling this project Last Light. Every participating species will contribute whatever they can. Resources, technology, construction capacity, scientific knowledge. We're going to build the array, and we're going to do it in time." Sung Ho raised his hand hesitantly. "Admiral, you should know that there's a significant chance this won't work. The Weaver theory is sound but untested. If we're wrong, if we miscalculate even slightly, the array could make things worse. It could accelerate the cascade instead of stopping it." "What's the alternative?" she asked. "We could try to evacuate beyond the galaxy, save as many as possible." "How many is as many as possible?" Sung Ho consulted his calculations. "With every ship we have working constantly for 18 months, maybe 10 million people, less than 1% of humanity, and an even smaller fraction of galactic population." "Then we don't have an alternative," Bora said flatly. "We try to save everyone, or we're just choosing who dies last." Hyunwoo watched as the room absorbed this. Scientists and engineers, diplomats and military officers, humans and aliens all coming to the same conclusion. The darkness between galaxies held secrets that most people never thought about. Out here, where stars were distant pinpricks and planets were myths told in navigation charts, Dr. Hyunwoo Kim floated in his observation chair and wondered if he had wasted 5 years of his life chasing Ghost, the survey vessel, Horizon's edge drifted through the junction point between the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxies, scanning debris fields that were older than human civilization. Hyunwoo led a small team of researchers who specialized in finding remnants of dead alien cultures. Most days they found nothing but rocks and frozen gases. Today felt different. "I'm getting something weird," Jinna Park said from her station. She handled communications and sensor arrays, and her voice carried a note of confusion that made Hyunwoo sit up straighter. "There's a massive crystalline structure about 2 million kilometers ahead. It's not natural." Daehyun Choi, their engineer, pulled up the scan data on the main screen. The image showed something enormous, roughly the size of Earth's moon, geometric and impossibly perfect. It reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "That shouldn't exist," he said quietly. "The energy signature is all wrong." "It's active." Young Mai Lee, who managed their AI systems, was already running analysis programs. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces as data streamed past her eyes. "The structure is approximately 4 billion years old, give or take a few 100 million years. It's composed of a crystalline matrix we've never encountered before. And it's broadcasting." "Broadcasting what?" Hyunwoo asked. He felt his heart rate increase. This was the kind of discovery that archaeologists dreamed about, the kind that rewrote textbooks and made careers. "Everything," Young Mi replied. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's broadcasting in every known language format, every mathematical system, every possible way of encoding information. Wait, I'm getting a count now. 10 million distinct messages. 10 million separate transmissions, all stored and repeating on a loop." The ship fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. 10 million messages. Hyunwoo tried to imagine what could require that much communication. What could be so important that someone built a moon-sized structure just to store warnings? "Warnings?" Jinna asked. She had been reading over Young Mi's shoulder. "These are all warning messages?" Young Mi nodded slowly. "Every single one. I'm running them through translation matrices now, but from what I can parse, each message is a final transmission from a different civilization. They're all dead now. These are their last words." Hyunwoo stood up and moved to the forward viewport. The crystalline structure hung in space before them, beautiful and terrible. 10 million civilizations had died, and each one had used their final moments to send a warning into the void. A warning that might sit unread for billions of years, until someone like him came along. "Can we get closer?" he asked Daehyun. The engineer checked their fuel reserves and the stability of the structure's energy field. "Yes, but I don't recommend docking. That energy signature could interfere with our systems. We should observe from a safe distance." "Define safe distance," Hyunwoo said. 10,000 kilometers. Any closer and we risk system failures." Hyunwoo made a decision that he would later recognize as the moment everything changed. "Take us to 5,000 kilometers. We need to interface with that structure directly." Jinna opened her mouth to protest, but something in Hyunwoo's expression stopped her. They had all signed up for this mission knowing the risks. Discovery required courage, even if that courage was sometimes indistinguishable from foolishness. The horizon's edge moved closer to the structure. As they approached, the crystalline surface began to pulse with light, responding to their presence. Young Mai gasped as her instruments lit up with new data. "It's activated. It knows we're here. It's offering us access to the warning database." "How?" Daehyun asked. "We haven't transmitted anything. It doesn't need us to transmit. It's reading our ship's computer systems, learning our languages, adapting its interface to match our technology. This thing is more advanced than anything humanity has ever built." A holographic display materialized in the center of their bridge, showing a simple interface with options displayed in perfect Korean, English, and a dozen other human languages. The message was clear: choose a warning to read. "Any warning? All warnings available." Hyunwoo stared at the interface. 10 million warnings from 10 million dead civilizations. The scale of death represented by this structure was almost incomprehensible. Each message was a species epitaph, their final desperate attempt to help whoever came after them. "We should wait," Young Mi said carefully. "We should translate the entire database first, catalog everything, run safety protocols. Some of these messages might contain memetic hazards or psychological triggers. We don't know what killed these civilizations. Some of them might have died from information itself." She was right, of course. The proper scientific approach was to be cautious, methodical, thorough. But Hyunwoo looked at that interface and felt something pulling at him. A need to know. A need to understand what could destroy 10 million different species across billions of years. One message, he said. We read one, just to understand what we're dealing with. Then we call for backup and do this properly. Jinna and Daehyun exchanged glances but didn't argue. Youngmi's hands hovered over her controls, hesitant. Which one? She asked. Random selection, Hyunwoo replied. Let's see what the universe wants to tell us. Youngmi entered the command. The interface flickered, processing, selecting from 10 million possibilities. A number appeared. Warning number 7294816. The holographic display shifted, showing alien symbols that rapidly translated into human language. The message began to load, text and images flowing across their screens. Hyunwoo read in silence. His team watched as the color drained from his face. His hands gripped the edge of his console until his knuckles turned white. The message was long, detailed, and precise. It described something called the Cascade. It explained how civilizations destroyed themselves without knowing. It showed mathematical proofs and physical evidence. And it showed that humanity was already infected with the same disease that killed the message's authors. The warning came from a species called the Architects. They had existed 3 billion years ago. They had been wise, powerful, and advanced beyond human imagination. And they had died screaming, watching their universe tear itself apart because of something as simple as faster-than-light travel. Hyunwoo finished reading. His breath came in short gasps. Jinna touched his shoulder, concerned, asking what the message said. But he couldn't speak yet. He could only stare at the holographic display, at the complex equations that proved humanity's doom, at the timeline that showed how little time remained. Sir? Youngmi prompted. What does it say? Hyunwoo turned to face his team. His voice came out as a whisper, but in the silent bridge everyone heard him clearly. Too late, he said. We're already too late. The meeting to discuss the planetary shield solution lasted 6 hours. Representatives from every participating species attended via holographic link. Hyunwoo presented the mathematics, the simulations, and the terrible conclusion. 57 worlds needed to sacrifice themselves. 2 billion souls needed to die so that everyone else might live. The room erupted in shouting. Some called it murder. Others called it necessary. A few suggested selecting uninhabited worlds. But Sung-ho explained that only inhabited worlds had the right type of shield generators. The technology was specifically designed to protect populations, scaled to match the number of people living under it. Admiral Bora stood up, and silence fell. We're not selecting which worlds die, she said firmly. We're asking for volunteers. We explain the situation honestly and completely. Any world that chooses to participate does so freely. Any world that refuses has that right. And if we don't get enough volunteers? Asked a Vril representative. Then we fail, the Admiral replied. But we fail with our honor intact. I won't order people to die. I won't make that choice for them. The decision was made. Jinna drafted a message explaining the situation, the requirements, and the consequences. It was broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Then they waited. The first response came within an hour. New Seoul, a Korean colony world with a population of 42 million, volunteered immediately. Their governor sent a simple message. We understand what's required, we accept. Tell us when and we'll be ready. Within 6 hours, all 57 required worlds had volunteered. More than 57, actually. 83 worlds offered to sacrifice themselves, more than enough. The problem was choosing which ones to accept. Hyunwoo read through the volunteer messages, each one breaking his heart in different ways. He saw courage and fear mixed together, parents who wrote goodbye letters to children on other worlds, communities that gathered together to face the end as families, people who were terrified but refused to let that terror stop them from doing what they believed was right. One message stood out from the others. It came from Haven's Hope, a small agricultural world that had been settled only 30 years ago. Their representative, a farmer named Soon-ja Kim, recorded a video message that was played in the crisis center. She stood in a field of grain, the wind moving through the crops behind her. I know some of you are thinking we're being foolish, she said to the camera. You're thinking maybe someone else should volunteer, maybe a world with fewer people or less to lose. But that's not how this works. We all have the same amount to lose. Everything. Our lives, our futures, our hopes and dreams and loves and fears. She paused, looking out at her fields. My grandparents came here to build something new, to make a world where people could live in peace and grow food and raise families. We've done that. This is a good world. And now we're going to give it up so that other good worlds can continue to exist. That's not a tragedy. That's the whole point of building something good in the first place. The video ended. Hyunwoo played it 3 more times, then added Haven's Hope to the list of 57 worlds that would die. Preparations began immediately. The array's activation was scheduled for exactly 2 weeks later, synchronized to account for light speed lag across galactic distances. Youngmi, now almost completely merged with the quantum coordination network, began the final alignment procedures. Her physical body remained on Luna, connected to machines, but her consciousness existed everywhere at once. Haewon stayed with her constantly during those final 2 weeks. Young Mai could still speak after a fashion, though her words often didn't make sense in linear time. She would answer questions before they were asked. She would reference events that hadn't happened yet. But sometimes, in moments of clarity, she was still herself. Am I still human? She asked Haewon one night 3 days before activation. Haewon held her hand carefully, mindful of the neural interface cables. I don't know. Does it matter? I can feel the 57 worlds. I can feel every person on them. 2 billion individual minds, all afraid, all brave. When the array activates, I'll feel them die. I'll experience their deaths from inside their own thoughts. Young Mi's eyes focused on Haewon. How does anyone survive knowing that? You don't, Haewon said honestly. You just keep going anyway. On the 57 volunteer worlds, people spent their final days in different ways. Some prayed. Some partied. Some simply spent time with loved ones, saying everything they had never said before. The governments of those worlds organized evacuation efforts for children, using the few remaining authorized FTL flights to move anyone under 18 to safety. Some children refused to go, choosing to stay with their families. Jinna spent the last week visiting as many volunteer worlds as she could. She didn't know what she could possibly say to people who had chosen to die, but she felt like someone needed to bear witness. Someone needed to see their courage and remember it. On Haven's Hope, she found Soonja Kim still working in her fields. The farmer explained that she wanted to die doing something familiar, something that made sense. Jinna helped her harvest grain for 3 hours, and they didn't talk about the array or the cascade or the end of everything. They just talked about growing things and how beautiful the world was. Hyunwoo remained on Luna, overseeing final preparations and slowly going insane from the pressure. He reviewed calculations obsessively, looking for any error, any alternative to what they were about to do. Sung-ho had to physically stop him from running the numbers for the 15th time. It's done, Sung-ho said gently. The math is right. The array will work. You need to let it go. 2 billion people, Hyunwoo whispered. I'm going to kill 2 billion people. No, 2 billion people are choosing to save everyone else. Don't take that away from them by claiming responsibility for their choice. The day of activation arrived. Across the galaxy, ships moved into position. Stations went on full alert. People gathered in public spaces, watching broadcasts that explained what was about to happen. The 57 volunteer worlds had countdown timers displayed on every screen, showing exactly how long they had left. Young Mi began the final synchronization sequence. Her consciousness stretched across 10,000 pulse generators, checking alignments, adjusting tolerances, compensating for quantum fluctuations. She existed in a state that couldn't properly be called thought anymore. She was the array. She was the calculations. She was the desperate hope of trillions of people who were trusting her to save them. At 30 minutes before activation, Daehyun reported a problem. Generator 7439 is showing a power fluctuation. It's small, but at this scale, small errors cascade into big failures. Can we fix it? Hyunwoo asked. Not in 30 minutes. We'd need to shut down the generator, recalibrate, and restart. That would throw off the synchronization. Young Mi's voice came through the communication system, strange and echoing and barely recognizable. I can compensate. I'll redistribute the load across the network. The other generators can handle the extra burden. That will increase the feedback on the planetary shields, Sung-ho warned. The discharge will be more intense. I know, Young Mi said. The people on those worlds will die faster, but they'll die either way. This just makes it more certain. The countdown continued. At 10 minutes, the volunteer worlds began their final broadcasts. 57 different goodbye messages transmitted to the galaxy. Some were speeches, some were songs, some were just silence, punctuated by the sound of people breathing. At 5 minutes, Hyunwoo addressed the galaxy one final time. His voice was transmitted to every inhabited world, every ship, every station. In a few minutes, we're going to attempt something that's never been done before. We're going to try to heal reality itself. The cost is terrible. The chance of failure is real. But we're trying anyway because that's what living things do. We fight for the future even when the odds are against us. He paused, gathering his courage for what came next. To the people on the 57 worlds, I don't have words adequate to express what you're doing. You're giving everything so that others can have something. That's the most human thing I can imagine, and I say human not as a species but as a quality. Humanity at its best. You're showing the galaxy what it means to choose hope over despair. At 1 minute, Young Mi's vital signs began to spike. Haewon watched the monitors in horror as neural activity surged beyond anything their equipment could properly measure. Young Mi's physical body was seizing, but her consciousness was expanding, growing, becoming something vast and strange and terrible and beautiful. At 30 seconds, the people on the volunteer worlds held hands. They embraced. They said, I love you and I forgive you and thank you for being in my life. Some prayed. Some laughed. Some cried. All of them were brave in their own ways. At 10 seconds, Young Mi synchronized all generators to quantum precision. The array hummed with power, drawing energy from stars and shields and the fabric of space-time itself. At 0, Hyunwoo gave the command. Activate the array. 10,000 generators fired simultaneously. The pulse wave propagated outward at the speed of light. A ripple in the fundamental structure of reality. Young Mi screamed as she channeled impossible amounts of energy through her consciousness. Jinna watched Hyunwoo's face and felt fear crawl up her spine. She had worked with him for 3 years through dangerous situations and close calls, and she had never seen him look like this. Not afraid exactly. Worse than afraid. Defeated. Show us, she said quietly. Whatever it says, we need to see it. Hyunwoo nodded and gestured to Young Mi, who transferred the architect warning to the main display. The message filled their screens, accompanied by 3-dimensional models and mathematical formulas that made Jinna's head hurt to look at. The architects had been old when Earth was young. They had mapped galaxies, built structures that spanned solar systems and achieved a level of technological advancement that humanity could barely imagine. They had also invented faster-than-light travel using quantum tunneling, the same basic principle that human ships use today, and that invention had killed them. I don't understand, Daehyun said, reading through the technical specifications. They're saying that FTL travel damages space-time? That's impossible. We've been using quantum tunneling drives for over 200 years. Our scientists would have detected any problems. Young Mi was already running calculations on her secondary screens. Her expression grew more troubled with each passing second. No, she said slowly. They wouldn't have. Look at the scale. Each individual FTL jump creates a microscopic tear in the fabric of reality. We're talking about damage at the quantum level, smaller than anything our instruments can directly measure. 1 tear, 100 tears, even 1 million tears wouldn't matter. They would heal naturally over time, but, Jinna prompted, knowing there had to be more. But the architects calculated that after approximately 10 billion FTL jumps in a given region of space, the cumulative damage reaches a critical threshold. The tears stop healing. They start growing. And once that process begins, it cascades. Each tear makes the next one bigger. The fabric of space-time starts to unravel like a pulled thread in a sweater. Hyunwoo pulled up another section of the message. It showed a timeline, starting from the architects' first FTL jump to their final days. They had 500 years of FTL travel before they discovered the problem. By then, they had made approximately 50 billion jumps. The cascade had already begun in multiple regions of their territory. They spent another 50 years trying to stop it or reverse it. Nothing worked. In the end, their entire civilization collapsed as reality itself became unstable. What happens when reality becomes unstable? Jinna asked, not sure she wanted to know the answer. The holographic display showed simulations based on architect observations. In the affected zones, physics stopped following consistent rules. Gravity would reverse randomly. Time flowed at different rates in different locations, sometimes backward. Matter would spontaneously transform into energy, or different forms of matter. Ships would jump to FTL and never arrive at their destinations, lost in dimensional spaces that shouldn't exist. The worst part was the effect on living things. The simulations showed architect citizens in the affected zones, their bodies torn apart and reconstituted incorrectly, as the fundamental forces that held atoms together began to fail. Some died instantly, others existed in states that couldn't properly be called alive or dead, trapped in temporal loops or spread across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dae-hyun turned away from the screen, his face pale. Jinna felt her stomach turn. Young Mi just stared, processing the information with the same clinical focus she applied to all problems, no matter how terrible. How many FTL jumps has humanity made? Young Mi asked quietly. Hyunwoo had already checked. Approximately 140 million jumps in our 200-year history of FTL travel. But that's just humanity. There are currently 147 known spacefaring species in the galaxy, all using similar FTL technology. Most of them have been using it longer than we have. Young Mi's fingers flew across her interface. If we assume an average of 200 years of FTL use per species, with similar usage rates to humanity, we're looking at approximately 20 billion jumps total. That's twice the threshold the architects calculated. The bridge fell silent. Outside their viewport, the crystalline datasphere pulsed with gentle light, a monument to 10 million dead civilizations. And now humanity would join them. Maybe the architects were wrong, Jinna said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. Maybe their science was flawed. Maybe, I need to check something. Young Mi interrupted. She started pulling up additional warnings from the datasphere, searching for specific keywords. If this is real, if the cascade is a universal threat, other civilizations should have mentioned it. She worked in silence for 10 minutes while the others watched. Finally, she stopped and turned to face them. 17 other species in the database specifically mentioned the cascade or phenomena, matching its description. They all used FTL technology. They all discovered the problem too late. And 3 of them had more advanced science than the architects. Their mathematics all agree. Dae-hyun slumped into his chair. So we're dead. The galaxy is dead. Everything is dead. Not yet, Hyunwoo said. His voice was steadier now, the initial shock wearing off. The architects said it took 50 years from when they discovered the problem to when their civilization ended. We need to figure out where we are in that timeline. We need to know how long we have. Young Mi accessed the Horizon's Edge sensor logs, pulling data from their deep space observations over the past 5 years. She compared it to the architect warning signs, looking for matches. What she found made her breath catch. Sir, we've been recording anomalies for 3 years now. We thought they were just sensor glitches or natural phenomena. Unexplained gravity fluctuations in Sector 7-9. Temporal distortions near the Sagittarius Arm. Reports from frontier colonies about physics acting strangely. She pulled up a galactic map and highlighted dozens of locations. These match the early warning signs the architects described. Show me the cascade spread pattern, Hyunwoo ordered. The holographic display shifted, showing the galaxy with red zones spreading like a disease. The simulation was based on the architect models, adjusted for current FTL jump density in known space. The red zones started small, scattered across the galaxy, where FTL travel was most common. Then they grew, slowly at first, then faster and faster as the cascade effect accelerated. The simulation included a timeline. Jinna watched in horror as the red zones spread across human space. 18 months. That's how long they had before the nearest cascade zone reached Earth. After that, the simulation showed the red spreading across the entire galaxy over the next century, consuming everything. 18 months, she whispered. That's all the time we have. Hyunwoo stared at the simulation, his mind racing. The architects had failed to stop the cascade. 17 other species had failed, but they had all been working alone, fighting the problem in isolation as their civilizations collapsed around them. Humanity wasn't alone. Humanity had allies, trading partners, even former enemies who had become friends. 147 spacefaring species, all facing the same threat, all with different technologies, different perspectives, different ways of thinking about the problem. We need to contact Earth immediately, he said. We need to warn everyone, human and alien alike. And we need to access the rest of these warnings. The architects and the others failed, but they left us their research, their attempts, their partial solutions. Maybe if we combine everything they learned with everything we know, we can find a way to stop this. That's insane, Dae-hyun said, but there was hope in his voice now. Do you know what you're proposing? Uniting the entire galaxy to fight a threat that destroyed 10 million previous civilizations? Getting species who hate each other to work together? Solving a problem in 18 months that the architects couldn't solve in 50 years? Hyunwoo looked at his team, then back at the data sphere floating outside their window. 10 million warnings, 10 million failures, but also 10 million attempts, 10 million pieces of a puzzle that no one had ever put together before. Yes, he said simply, that's exactly what I'm proposing. Because the alternative is sitting here and waiting to die. Jinna moved to her communication console. I'll start the emergency transmission to Earth. This is going to cause panic. Let it, Hyunwoo replied. Panic that leads to action is better than calm that leads to extinction. Young Mai was already downloading the entire contents of the data sphere, all 10 million warnings, preparing to transmit them to every scientific institution humanity had. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. We'll need every brilliant mind in the galaxy working on this problem. The horizon's edge came alive with activity. Warning messages began transmitting across the vast distance to human space, traveling at light speed with urgent priority codes attached. Somewhere back home, alarms would start ringing. Scientists would be woken from sleep. Politicians would convene emergency sessions, and the galaxy would learn that it was dying, one FTL jump at a time. They were going to attempt the impossible, build something that had never been built. Unite a Project Last Light began with a miracle of organization that surprised everyone involved. Within 48 hours of the crisis meeting on Luna, 17 species had committed their full industrial capacity to the array. Within a week, that number had grown to 63. By the end of the first month, 112 species were actively participating in the construction effort. Dae-hyun found himself coordinating the largest engineering project in galactic history. 400,000 technicians spread across 24 solar systems, all working from his blueprints, all depending on his decisions. He slept 3 hours a night and drank coffee until his hands shook, but the array was taking shape. The first generator came online 37 days after project start. It was a massive structure built in orbit around a red dwarf star, drawing power directly from the stellar core. When they activated it for testing, the pulse was visible across half a light year, a ripple in space-time that made every sensor in the system scream warnings. But it worked. The mathematics held. 1 generator down, 9,999 to go. Jinna traveled constantly, jumping from system to system despite knowing that each jump added microscopic damage to reality. She met with alien councils, negotiated with hostile governments, and convinced skeptical populations that cooperation was their only chance. The work exhausted her, but she kept going because stopping meant thinking about how little time they had left. Her greatest diplomatic achievement came in the 3rd month. The deep-mined Commonwealth, an aquatic species that had fought a bitter war with humanity 50 years ago, refused to participate. Their representative told Jinna that they would rather die with dignity than work with humans who had killed millions of their people in that old conflict. Jinna spent 6 hours in an underwater facility, breathing through a respirator and talking to the Commonwealth's council. She didn't try to justify the war or pretend the deaths hadn't happened. Instead, she talked about the future that would never exist if they failed. The children who would never be born. The art that would never be created. The peace that would never be achieved because everyone would be dead. At the end of those 6 hours, the deep-mined Commonwealth committed their entire construction fleet to the array. Their representative, a being whose name translated roughly as "she who remembers grief," told Jinna that they still hated humanity for what had happened. But they hated the cascade more. Young Mi's role was the most dangerous. The array needed perfect coordination across galactic distances, and the only way to achieve that was through a neural link between a living consciousness and the quantum coordination computers. She had volunteered immediately, knowing what it would cost. The interface process began in month 4. Doctors slowly integrated neural implants into young Mi's brain, connecting her consciousness to the array's network. Each surgery left her disoriented and struggling to remember who she was. The quantum computers didn't think like humans. They experienced time non-linearly, perceived possibilities rather than certainties, and existed in superposition states that human brains weren't designed to handle. Haewon monitored every procedure, watching helplessly as her friend's personality began to fragment under the strain. Young-mi started speaking in mathematical equations. She would suddenly know things that were happening on the other side of the galaxy. Sometimes she would look at Haewon and not recognize her. "We should stop," Haewon said after the 9th surgery. "We're losing her." "No," Young-mi replied, her voice distant and strange. "You're finding me. I'm becoming more than I was. When the array activates, I'll be everywhere at once. I'll exist at 10,000 points simultaneously. It's beautiful, Haewon. You should see what I see." Haewon cried that night for the first time since childhood. Young-mi was still alive, still breathing, but the person she had known was disappearing, replaced by something vast and incomprehensible. Hyunwoo divided his time between overseeing the construction and studying the data sphere. He read through thousands of warnings, looking for any detail that might help them succeed where others had failed. Most were just descriptions of the cascade and its effects. But some contained fragments of research, partial solutions, ideas that had never been tested. One warning particularly haunted him. A species called the Singers had discovered the cascade and immediately stopped all FTL travel. They lived on a single world, accepting isolation rather than contributing to the damage. For 200 years they survived while the rest of the galaxy tore itself apart around them. Then a cascade zone reached their system, created by other species' FTL jumps, and they died screaming in their paradise, killed by sins they had refused to commit. The lesson was clear. Abstinence wasn't enough. The damage was already done. They had to fix it or die trying. By month 9, construction was 70% complete. 7,000 generators operational, 3,000 still under construction. The schedule was aggressive but achievable. They would make the deadline with 2 weeks to spare. Celebrations were premature but cautiously optimistic. Then reality began to accelerate its collapse. The first colony to experience major cascade effects was Haven's Rest, a human settlement on the edge of explored space. The distortions started small, clocks running backward for a few seconds, objects floating upward instead of falling down. Within a week, the distortions became catastrophic. People aged years in minutes. Children spoke in languages that had never existed. The ground spontaneously transmuted into water, then back into stone, then into nothing at all. The colony sent desperate transmissions as reality unwound around them. Hyunwoo watched the final message from Governor Jiwoo Park, a woman he had met once at a conference. She stood in front of a viewport showing a sky that had turned inside out, stars bleeding colors that shouldn't exist, and calmly explained what was happening to her people. "We're not afraid," she said, and Hyunwoo believed her. "We knew this was possible. We're just sorry we won't be here to see if you succeed. Finish the array, make our deaths mean something." The transmission ended. Haven's Rest stopped responding to all hails. The cascade zone expanded, consuming the entire system in less than 48 hours. The galactic population learned that the crisis was no longer theoretical. Panic returned, stronger than before. 2 colonies attempted to evacuate, abandoning the array construction in favor of running. The ships jumped to FTL and accelerated the very problem they were trying to escape. Both colonies vanished into cascade zones their own jumps had helped create. Admiral Bo-Ra made an announcement that was broadcast to every inhabited world. Effective immediately, all FTL travel is banned except for array construction purposes. Any ship that violates this order will be fired upon. I don't care what your reasons are. I don't care if you're trying to visit family or escape danger or any other justification. Every FTL jump makes this worse. Every jump kills people. Stay where you are or help us build. Those are your only options. The order was harsh and controversial, but most governments enforced it. The alternative was chaos. Construction continued despite the fear. By month 12, 9,000 generators were complete. By month 14, all construction was finished. The array existed, stretching across the galaxy in a web of precisely positioned pulse generators, all connected to Young-mi's fragmenting consciousness. Sung-ho began final system checks. The mathematics required perfection, but mathematics existed in an ideal world. Reality was messier. Calibration errors, equipment tolerances, quantum uncertainties. All these factors had to be accounted for and adjusted. During the final calculations, he discovered a problem that made his blood run cold. "We don't have enough power," he told Hyunwoo privately, showing him the equations. "The generators are working perfectly, but the cascade is worse than we thought. We need 30% more energy to generate a strong enough resonance wave. Where do we get 30% more energy? Hyunwoo asked. We've tapped every available resource. We've pushed our technology to its limits. There's nothing left to use. Sung-ho pulled up a simulation on his tablet. It showed planetary defense shields, the massive energy fields that protected inhabited worlds from asteroid impacts and radiation. Each shield generator was essentially a massive power source, capable of projecting force fields across entire hemispheres. We use the shields, he said quietly. We reconfigure them as additional pulse generators, feed their energy into the array through the quantum coordination network. Hyunwoo looked at the calculations and felt his stomach drop. How many shields would we need? 57 planetary shields, 57 inhabited worlds. And what happens to those worlds when we drain their shields for the pulse? Sung-ho met his eyes. The feedback will overload their power grids. Total energy discharge into the shield generators. Everything within range will be vaporized. That's approximately 2 billion people across those 57 worlds. 2 billion lives to save trillions. Hyunwoo sat in silence, processing what he was being asked to do. Choose 57 worlds to die so that others might live. Select which planets would sacrifice themselves. Make a decision that no person should ever have to make. There has to be another way.